So, I tried the anime review thing once before, and I didn't really like the results. I'm not a reviewer, plain and simple. I'm a guy who likes to think about things, and moreover, I love to answer questions that no one has asked me. I love philosophy, and as a matter of fact, I've given a number of panels about philosophy in anime at cons, and it's a trend I've been seeing more and more at cons lately. So I figure that I'll try making a show out of it. I can't really imagine any large scale of people liking something that's niche, but if I can change the way one person views anime, and then by extension maybe change the way that person views the world, the prospect of that alone makes this whole endeavor worthwhile. So how's this gonna work? Well, I'm gonna take an anime, quickly summarize it, address the philosophy I think it's telling, and then I'll recommend some reading along the same lines, in case you like the philosophy and you want to study more about it. So, at my panels, I get questions about three animes more than any other: The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, Evangelion, and Black Butler, which I still haven't seen. Now, I'm going to give you my philosophical views of Haruhi as my first episode, because I feel there actually is a whole lot of substance that gets missed in all the fun of the series. Fair warning, this isn't a review. Spoilers are ahead. Also, it may be a little hard to keep up if you haven't seen the show. And as a side note, this show it deals largely with theology, or the philosophy of God, so get your frame of mind in the right place. So, jumping right in, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya is the story of a high school boy, Kion, and his interactions and discoveries with a fellow high school student, Haruhi Suzumiya, who may or may not be more than meets the eye. Story-wise, the thing I like about Haruhi is that it's very character-focused, establishing the motivations of all the characters early on. Well, everyone except Kion. What we have here is one oblivious character, Haruhi, and four characters with different theories and proofs regarding Haruhi. Kion is based in logic and more or less sees Haruhi as a strange, but otherwise normal human girl. Yuki shows the most power of any of the characters and sees Haruhi as something of the next step in evolution. Miss Asahina is from the future, she's a time traveler, and has come to investigate Haruhi on the grounds that she caused a time quake a few years ago. And finally we have Itsuki, a psychic that views Haruhi as a god. So we have a cynic, one who wants to use Haruhi for science, one who wants to use Haruhi for mankind, and one who wants to use Haruhi for himself. For my money, it seems like this is some sort of guide on how to worship. Consider this: Haruhi, who is a god parallel, at the end of this series, she gets bored of the world and she's considering making a new one. And it's not Yuki's superpowers or her science, and it's not Miss Asahina's time laws, and it's not Itsuki's giant killing psychic powers that convince her to give the world another chance. It's cynical Kion's affection, specifically his kiss, that saves the day. Point one, then, in my philosophical dissection of Haruhi is this: God seeks nothing from man except his love. Now might be a good time for an aside. I'm not going to try and defend these claims, I'm simply saying what I think the anime is saying. I'm not trying to start a debate saying any of these are right or wrong. I'm simply pointing out what I think the anime is pointing out. Now there's also the matter of Kion trying to figure out Haruhi. Now the story of the cynic coming to God is ages old, but here we have an interesting narrative twist. All the people with the superpowers who, manipulating the properties of the environment, traveling through time, giant killing psychic balls, they all hail Haruhi as being this all-powerful being, but we never really see Haruhi specifically do anything like, say, shoot a lightning bolt. The closest we get is again at the last episodes when Haruhi's in closed space. Point two, then, is that God is revealed through his believers. Finally, there's the matter of how much Kion disagrees with almost everything Haruhi does. He hates her methods, though he does admit that they keep things interesting. However, despite his objection, Haruhi always gets her way, and every other member of the SOS Brigade just sort of goes with it despite them being wrong more often than not. Point three, then, is that God's law is God's law, whether we agree with it or not. I understand that was a little more of an ethical point than a theological point, but that's impertinent right now. I'm going to move on now to what I like to call Haruhi and the Five Proofs. The Five Proofs are St. Thomas Aquinas' 5 methods that we can prove that God exists through reason alone, and they all relate to Haruhi pretty easily. The first proof is the first mover argument, more or less that anything set into motion had to be pushed by something else, eventually leading up to one thing pushing everything into motion. We can see excellent examples of this in actually every episode of Haruhi. She literally sets the events of every episode into motion. She is the cause of all the action. The second proof is the argument for first cause. That is, that everything was created, had to have been created by something else. Yuki, Miss Asahina, and Itsuki all refer to an event a few years ago that may actually be the origin of the universe. Yuki mentioned specifically how Haruhi can create matter from nothing. Simple enough. The third proof is where things get a little more complicated. The third proof is the argument of contingency, which more or less states that because everything... If you think back to the last episodes of Haruhi where she deemed the world boring and our world started to dissolve, I think this proof falls pretty easily into place. The fourth proof is the argument from degree, simply stating that since we can observe things to be either good or bad, there must be an ultimate good thing for us to judge everything against. We can see a bit of this in Kion's reaction to Haruhi's closed space, in that we see them to be created by Haruhi's stress and we know them to be bad. The last proof is the so-called theological argument, which states everything in the universe is working for some goal, and from this we can infer that someone must be pulling the strings, giving everything a goal, directing the whole show. Directing the whole show, I wonder how Haruhi could prove that she did that, directing.
Now, on to recommended reading. If you're digging the philosophy of Haruhi, I recommend the Bible! Whoa! Specifically the Book of Romans. Kinda lame for a first recommendation, I know, but trust me, even if you're an atheist, there's a lot of fine philosophy in the Bible, ripe for the contemplation. Also, if you're not familiar with the 5 proofs, look up Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, I think that's how it's said. It's actually all public domain now, so it's easy to find a free version online. You could also just look up the 5 proofs on Wikipedia or something, but that's far less fancy than saying Summa Theologica. Well, that's it for now. Send me your requests, and I'll philosophize them for you and serve you up a tasty dish of knowledge.